Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
Yes, we have regrets from Councillor Bird and Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Adams?
Yes, I have an interest to declare in item 3 relating to OPA 306, section 8.6.4.3c relating to drive-throughs, and bylaw 2011-003, which is related to that one, as TDL Corporation has an interest in that, and my wife is an employee of TDL Group.
Thank you, Councillor. Could a pair of councillors favor council with a motion and a second to resolve in a committee of the whole? Councillor Grant, Councillor Elgar, all in favor? Opposed, if any? We are resolved into committee of the whole. This evening we have, I believe it is 2 consent items. The first one is the assumption of subdivision plan 20M-975 Ashley Herrick Phase 4, and the recommendation is that the assumption be approved and the associated bylaw be passed. How do you wish to proceed? Councillor Adams.
I'll move item 1.
Item 1 is moved. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That consent item is adopted. The second one is the partial release of subdivision agreement H321682 and the partial release of site plan agreement H759253 Staybridge Suites Hotel. How do you wish to proceed, Council? Councillor Giddings. Councillor Giddings moves the recommendation. Discussion, all in favor? That carries. That consent item is also approved. That brings us to our public hearing items, and we have 2 tonight. And if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the Town of Oakville in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and/or plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And our first item is the official plan amendment for Palermo Village, north of Dundas Street. This is the statutory public meeting and the recommendation report. And we have a presentation from Ida Wagre from our planning department. Ms. Wagre, council and the public are all ears.
Great, thank you. Thank you. This is the public statutory meeting and recommendation report for an official plan amendment for Palermo Village north of Dundas Street. Meeting the requirements for a statutory meeting, notice has been advertised in the paper as well as mailed out to property owners who live within 120 meters of the subject area. The report is listed as item 3 on the agenda starting on page 9. The staff report tonight makes 2 recommendations. 1, that the staff report itself be received, and 2, that official plan amendment 306 for the North Oakville West secondary plan be approved. The agenda for my presentation is as follows. First, I will cover the context of this amendment. Second is an overview with a planning timeline. Next are the issues which were identified from the stakeholders and public involved. Following, I'll cover a few other Palermo Village projects that this amendment relates to. And then we'll get into the actual policies for land use and finish off with next steps and key dates. To start off, it's important to understand the planning context for this area. Policy-wise, the town is divided by Dundas Street. South of Dundas Street is covered by the Livable Oakville Plan, adopted by Council in 2009. And north of Dundas Street is under the North Oakville secondary plans. Now looking at the North Oakville portion only, this area is divided by 16 Mile Creek, and east of the creek is a North Oakville East secondary plan, which was finalized and approved in 2008. And on the other side, west, is the North Oakville West secondary plan, approved by Council in 2009. And looking at the West plan in further detail, the West plan is predominantly covered by 2 main land uses. The lands area shown in yellow are designated employment land, providing office jobs to satisfy important growth targets for this area. And the area shown in green is a natural heritage system. The plan is finalized except for the portion of land hatched in red, which is currently before the Ontario Municipal Board. And the area that's under white, under the red hatching, is called a special study area in the West Plan and currently has no policies in place to govern land use. With respect to servicing, this area is not serviced. Servicing for water and wastewater is responsibility of the region of Halton. At this time, there's no area servicing plan completed, but it will be determined as the area is developed. On a community level, Palermo Village is found around the intersection of Dundas Street and Old Bronte Road. The subject area for this proposed amendment only applies to the northerly portion of Palermo Village, so this is under the North Oakville West secondary plan. And this portion contains a few detached houses, a church, and inactive farmland. The population is less than 100 people, and it is about 19 hectares in size. There have been many studies to date relating to Palermo Village. I'm going to walk through a timeline of some of the key projects. To start off in 2003, there was a land use study done for Palermo Village, both north and south of Dundas, and had recommendations for land use as well as traffic improvements. In January 2004, there was a study done by consultants called Unterman McPhail to assess the cultural heritage resources and built heritage features in North Oakville. This work fed into the massive undertaking, which was called the North Oakville West Secondary Plan and got approved in May 25, 2009. Although policies for mixed use had been developed, specific policies for this area were not recommended until further analysis on heritage features was completed. In the meantime, it was noted as a special study area. I'd like to emphasize that therefore there are currently no policies in place at this time to guide land use or development for Palermo Village north of Dundas Street. Next, the study, Palermo Village, a Heritage Resources Review and Strategy, was undertaken by staff in November 2008. This report went to Heritage Oakville and was endorsed by Council in early 2009. The study recommended that official plan policies were the best way for heritage conservation in Palermo Village. On June 22, 2009, Council adopted the Livable Oakville Plan, which identified Palermo Village as a primary growth area for mixed use. And today we're here to discuss policy modifications to the West Plan through an amendment which we're calling OPA 306. Last spring, on April 26th, we held an open house before the staff report was presented to Council. Later in the fall, we also held a stakeholder session with a smaller group of people to discuss the issues relevant to the community. Over these past two meetings and subsequent correspondence, we received a great deal of feedback and input from the community and its stakeholders. And all the letters and emails that were received at the time of print of the staff report are found in your Appendix A in the agenda. In summary, we heard there was an interest in heritage of Palermo Village and anxiety for further losing heritage resources in the area. There was interest in property values from those who own land, and there was interest in development and change. People bought into the area and were promised something that has still not happened. There was some interest in what mixed use can mean and look like in the community, and there was curiosity about new development applications such as Fox Farm across the street with 2 new schools coming to the area and road connections. And there were also connections about the planned bus rapid transit for Dundas Street and the future terminal. Over letters I heard from representatives of landowners who had development interests with questions on servicing, land size, and uses. And there was concern for safe connections to cross Dundas Street and improved vehicular access given the very limited road structure. Overall, there was a great deal of community pride in Palermo Village with a strong desire to see both the north and the south parts integrated. Alongside these policies, there are a few other projects that feed into this work. For one, we've begun a streetscaping plan for Old Bronte Road. Right now, the road is much too wide and has no consistent features. Streetscaping plans are ways to figure out the right-of-way or width of the road and all the features that go with that. A plan for generous sidewalks, street trees and plantings, street furniture, and beautification. This too can be directly influenced and tied to the heritage character of the area, such as having signature lampposts with a heritage feel and special signage. This would be the opportunity where we could explore a safe pedestrian passage for crossing Dundas Street, which all of staff is very mindful of. In addition, Palermo Village is getting a new transit station. The site selection exercise to determine which corner of Bronte Road and Dundas is happening at the moment. The transit station is to accommodate town buses as well as future GO buses to link Milton with Bronte Station. This leads up to the focus of the meeting, the policies that we have to replace the blank right now we have in the plan. The area is surrounded by mainly employment uses to the west, shown in yellow on this map, and natural heritage system in dark green. East of the study area is Palermo Park, 7.4 hectares of area intended for active recreational uses with baseball diamonds, a dog area, and a water play area. And south of Dundas is Palermo Village growth area, as indicated in livable Oakville. There are a few visual examples to show the kind of built form the policies can achieve for this area. One is an example of heritage integration. This is the National Ballet School in Toronto, and it shows that two uses, low density and high density, old and new, can both coexist and provide a beautiful landmark for a community. This is a shot taken from downtown Oakville. It shows a strong street-related built edge that's continuous. Commercial use is at grade and pedestrian activity is easy and convenient. The policies proposed today also allow for community gathering spaces such as this one in the photo, showing an urban square. So the amendment creates the designation for what we're calling Palermo Village North Urban Core Area. This designation is a combination of land use policies with specific elements relating to cultural heritage, urban design, and consideration to adjacent land uses. Beginning with land use, there's a full range of permitted uses: residential, commercial, and institutional. Development is proposed to be primarily in mixed-use buildings, which means commercial at grade and office or residential on top. However, single-use buildings are also permitted. Densities range from 0.5 to 4.0 floor space index, which is in line with other urban cores found in North Oakville. And being an urban core area, this means that there will be no drive-throughs and no new gas stations. This is consistent with the Trafalgar urban core area in the approved East Plan. Drive-throughs are land intensive and take away from the heritage character emphasis that's needed for this community. There are also a set of cultural heritage policies that retain the heritage attributes that are found and integrate heritage character into new development that's compatible. The wording of the policies ensures that new development must be compatible with all cultural heritage resources listed and designated. The policies introduce urban design to guide well-designed development and streetscaping along Old Bronte Road, the main spine of Palermo Village. There's an emphasis on the integration with transit, especially since the area will see a new transit hub in the future. And urban design policies ensure the development is pedestrian-friendly and meet a high design standard. The minimum height proposed is 2 stories for commercial, 3 for other, with a maximum of 8 stories and 10 at corners. This is strongly consistent with livable Oakville on the other side of Dundas Street. Mixed use in this area allows for an appropriate transition between employment uses to the west and natural heritage to the east. And the policies conform to the province's growth plan through targets for employment and population in the rest of the secondary plan. From the past version of the policies that were given to the public, there have been revisions made for 4 main reasons. At our last council meeting held on January 10th, the report prepared by Heritage staff recommended that a Heritage Conservation District study for Palermo Village not be pursued, which council received. Therefore, there's greater emphasis on clear policies for heritage conservation in this OPA. In addition, there have been adjustments made to allow for the town's transit station to be built. There have also been clarifications made to land uses, densities, and heights, namely clarifying that single-use buildings are permitted. And lastly, there have been many but minor technical changes to situate the Palermo policies for mixed use in the greater North Oakville West Secondary Plan. So an example of this is adding the word residence to the policy that solely speaks to employees using transit. Updates like this were needed to provide context for mixed use in the plan. And these minor changes set the stage for residential growth to happen in an area that's predominantly employment or natural heritage based. So next steps. Last spring, planning staff held an open house in April. And later in the fall, there was a smaller meeting to update stakeholders. Last P&D meeting, that's January 10th, Council received a report from Heritage Planning staff to not study Palermo as a heritage conservation district at this time. And today we are here at a public statutory meeting on OPA 306 for the West Plan. And this is all in preparation for a board hearing coming up on February 22nd that involves land in the North Oakville West Secondary Plan. And finally, to recap, planning staff is recommending policies for Council's approval tonight. They are land use policies for mixed use to be set in the framework for future development. And to assure the public that's here tonight, there is no expropriation plan through these policies. These are long-term policy plans. Individual homes will remain, and gradually over time, these policies will actively shape new development. But before we can go forward with streetscaping, beautification, and finding a safe way to cross Highway 5, we have to take this first policy step. So these policies affect the northern portion of Palermo Village at Bronte Road and Dundas Street, and this would be an opportune time to take a position on the policies since this area is before the board in a month's time. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation, Council. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting and informative. I have a couple questions with respect to the actual policy in OPA document at the back of the agenda. Can I ask a couple questions with respect to that? I've already mentioned them to the Commissioner and to the Director, so I just want some clarification on a couple of these points. The first one is with respect to, and this, members of Council, you'll find this on page 142. In 8.6.4.2, it seems that the wording is inconsistent with what you'll find in 8.6.4.5 B and C. So in 4.2, it refers to encouraged. So in this particular case, the incorporation of cultural heritage resources of Palermo Village will be encouraged. But then when you go to 8.6.4.5, in B and C, you have more imperatives. You have shall be integrated and shall be compatible. So I'm concerned that there's some inconsistency in the wording of those two areas that could potentially lead to some OMB ambiguity. Can I get a response to that?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Knoll. The difference in the wording in those sections, is that the items that you find under 8642, A through D, are general objectives in terms of the policy construct. Then when you move to 8645, these are the operative policies of the document, so those are the ones that are operative parts of the plan that have to be considered. So that's why you see the stronger imperative wording with the word shall there, and you see as part of the objective more an encouragement for various things. So it's just a different construct of language based on the way the plan is structured.
But the wording in 8.6.4.5, that is the more important of the wording in the document?
That's the operative policies,
okay,
yes.
That's great. Thank you. That's very helpful. And I think that's all my questions I had. Your Worship, at some point in the evening, I have two minor amendments to wording I've already suggested to staff, and they've agreed to at least one of them. So I'd like to just put you on notice that at some point I'd like to introduce those as minor amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for the presentation. We've got a letter on our desk tonight. It's from Bowsfields, and it's related to Newmark Developments Limited. And they're stating, on its own, the proposed urban core area is not sufficiently large to provide for the forms of development and range of uses which are contemplated in the community design strategy. That's my first question. What is your reaction to that statement in this letter?
Well, from a planning standpoint, this is an area we're trying to target for mixed use. It's 19 hectares in size, which is the length of 19 football fields. So with compact, appropriately dense in development, mixed use is possible with the heights that we've suggested.
Okay, so you have no issue at all with that in that area. And the second part that I just want clarification on is the proposed maximum densities and heights as set out in section 8.6.44B are overly restrictive in terms of achieving the objectives set out for the urban core area.
Yeah, as an urban core area, it is consistent with the other urban cores found, such as the Trafalgar urban core area and Dundas Street urban core area. So this is all in line to fit within the broader secondary plan that's called North Oakville. So we find it appropriate.
And it's consistent with what we're doing at Trafalgar? Yeah.
It's slightly lower than Trafalgar.
Okay.
But it's in line, yes.
And there's one common thread which I think everybody is concerned about, and it has to do that there may not be a thread. It's about the linkage and the connectivity. And I heard you say tonight you can't address it tonight, but when will the residents be able to have it addressed, which will resolve an awful lot of angst in that area?
I think through the streetscaping plan that'll take place very soon. That's an opportunity for staff to explore and propose some options for having a safe pedestrian crossing for Dundas Street.
Which will not be walking across the street. You're thinking something over or under?
We haven't gone into that point yet, but I'm sure that there'll be a set of alternatives to consider and to discuss with the public.
And give me a time frame of when that would happen?
We've just finished up the terms of reference for that study, so we should be beginning the actual study very soon, and depending on how much public involvement is involved, it'll take a certain amount of time.
I would just add that the terms of reference have been drafted for that study to be undertaken, and it will definitely involve the regional staff with respect to their ongoing work along Dundas and the EA work that they've completed to date.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping, that we won't have, you're too late, you should have been here yesterday type thing. That's not going to happen?
I will commit that that will not happen.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, and just the final question is, the reason we have to get our policies in place is due to the fact that February 22nd is the next
That's right.
OMB date? Okay. Thanks very much, and thank you for the presentation. You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Any other members of council? All right. Are there any members of the public with information for council on this? We have one, or maybe we have more. We have 4 indications of members of the public with information to share with council on this item, and I'll poll the audience at the end of this list. Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation listed is Ms. Jean Wetlaufer.
Welcome, Ms. Wetlaufer. Council looks forward to your information.
The mic on? Good evening. I thought since I had sent you a letter, I should identify myself in person. I have lived on Old Bronte Road, south of Dundas, since 1964. So you can appreciate that I have seen lots of changes over the years. And whenever there have been meetings involving any future vision of Palermo, you can be sure that I have attended. So the changes coming to Palermo are not new. They've been talked about for a long time, and I don't think that they're a big surprise to anybody. I support the staff report that is coming tonight. I think you often hear from people when they are against something, so I think it might be kind of refreshing to hear from somebody who is in support of what you're doing. And my reasons are, well, I have a number, but there are two that I think are significant. I think that unity is one issue. Since Livable Oakville already has designated the south portion of Palermo to be mixed use, it makes sense to me for the north section to be so identified. So that's one thing. I think that would build to a more integrated kind of community, given that we can bridge that wonderful Dundas Street. The other thing is flexibility. I know we have a vision of the future. It includes public transit, a change from a very low-density population to a much higher-density population. And therein, I think, lies some of the difficulty. It's not taking a piece of empty ground and making something new out of it. You're transforming from something that has been old, traditional, and there for a long time into something that's urban and modern and new. And that's always kind of a difficult situation. But we've been in transition for a number of years, and I think some of us are just ready to get on with it. So I think that managing the transition from what the village has been to what it will become will be the major task going forward. I think that mixed use will encourage probably a variety of development plans to be brought forward, and I think that the zoning and regular approval processes that you have in place can ensure that there's compatibility with the structures that are already there. I think all of us have worried about the word expropriation, and so we're very happy to know that that's not in the cards. And I think that the unity and the flexibility that will be required as development comes to that area, I'm sure that we can all anticipate some of the needs that future residents may have, but I'm sure we cannot even begin to guess what they all might be. And that will have, I think, implications for how the development rolls out. So basically, I have been very pleased with the opportunities that the planning staff have provided for the residents and the consideration that have been accorded to us during this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Mr. Hatzinilo. I did it wrong, sorry. Mr. Hatzinikolaou. Hatzinikolaou. Sorry.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
I own the property on the south side of the Palermo Park. There's a gas station, a restaurant, gas bar, and everything else, and garage. And it's more land on the east side too. So I purchased this place in 1971 from British Petroleum. That time, mayor and the officials from BP, they come over, they congratulate him because I did so good job, because the place was really messy that time, and built it up. And I invest all my life, my life savings, what I had before, to build this place up. And I'm waiting now what else I can do more, because we have no water, no sewers, and we had and lots of land that was sitting there for the sewage system, because they need a lot of what we call a thing, 1 acre, maybe more, and for the water draining, and everything else. It's a big mess over there, and I'm waiting to develop it, fix it up, but I have no plans. Nobody told me what to do. What's the plan for that area?
Well, the plan is the plan that council is considering tonight, and you may perhaps wish, if it passes, you may wish to consult with professional advisors and look at the permissions that you obtain in the plan.
So, because I waited a long time there, and how many years, since '71, and nothing happened there. We have no water, no sewers. Can I get a water and sewer my own from somewhere?
Did you, in the presentation that the staff gave us, they made mention that These planning policy documents are required before the water and sewer can come. So I guess the best news for you and tonight is we're moving potentially a step closer to the water and sewer that you're expecting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Mr. Victor LaBrush.
Mr. LaBrush, we have a letter from you, I think.
Yes.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. We're responding to the notice on this matter, and we are here representing the brands of the Ontario Restaurant Hotel Motel Association and their specific member brands on this matter being A&W Food Services of Canada, McDonald's Restaurants of Canada, the TDL Group operators, owners of franchisees of Tim Hortons restaurants, Wendy's Restaurants of Canada, and again, their industry group being the Ontario Restaurant Association. We are providing our comments of concern and objection to a specific, very specific policy in the North Palermo Urban Village core area, not on the plan in its entirety, but on a specific section. And it's particularly Part 3, Section 8.6.4.3c, which states in part that drive-through uses are not permitted in the Palermo Village North Urban Core area. We've also provided 2 previous written pieces of correspondence to the town, which I trust you have our letter, as Mayor Burton had mentioned. We have extra copies if need be passed out tonight. The reference to our objection and concern is based on that specific policy I just read to you, which is the basis of our concern at this time. The fact that the representation of our clients and its further representation by solicitor on this matter regarding the prohibition of drive-thrus particularly has been sought, as you may be aware, through Livable Oakville official plan. Our clients have been granted recently full party status at the Ontario Municipal Board hearing for Livable Oakville relative to our previous objections to various prohibitions of drive-thrus specifically contained at the level of the official plan, which is contrary to several previous case decisions within the courts and at the Ontario Municipal Board. Since our last written comments to you on Livable Oakville, and more specifically this Amendment 306, it is very important to note that in the Ontario Municipal Board decision on granting our party status, it specifically notes and acknowledges that adequate level of study had not been completed to justify the previous recommendations and this council's endorsement, adopted by council, I should say, of those prohibitions in Livable Oakville. As such, the validity of the prohibitions has yet to be finally determined at the Ontario Municipal Board, but again, we have party status to hear that. Therefore, we would question why the town would move forward with additional prohibitions. We don't believe that it would be prudent for council to endorse this specific policy at this time until the matter has been adjudicated at the Ontario Municipal Board. And I would add that the matter of prohibition is not specific to drive-thrus within the official plan. It's the case law, and the Ontario Municipal Board is considering the prohibition of virtually any kind of use, whether that is appropriate to be contained at the level of the official plan. We'd also further note that the Palermo Village, the North Palermo Village urban core area, does allow for other service, retail, commercial land uses, including surface parking lot areas. And that, in our opinion, and has been consistently our opinion in our submissions here in front of this council and at the Ontario Municipal Board, is no different than permissions for surface parking lots and those service, retail, commercial uses that your plan permits. So we also heard this evening, as we've heard in the past, that drive-thrus represent an intensive land-consuming use. And in terms of submissions that have been accepted at the Ontario Municipal Board on more than one occasion, the exact opposite is the case. Drive-throughs represent a less intensive use of land than the alternative, which would be a freestanding or mixed-use development relying on a surface parking lot. That is further to say that studies, again, accepted at the Ontario Municipal Board and in the courts note that a reduction of parking is permitted when a drive-through is present with a restaurant of up to 35%. So it is not a more intensive land use. It is a less intensive land use than what Palermo Village permits, again, in a mixed-use form or freestanding restaurant type use. Those are our submissions. We'd be pleased to answer any questions. And again, we would respectfully request that the clause, as I've read to you, 8.6.4.3C, be removed from the plan and the amendment without that move forward.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions for the delegation? Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Our final delegation listed is Mr. Blair Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, just for the record, I appear on behalf of McKellar Estate. I filed a letter with the clerk on January the 19th, and I'd just like to be sure.
We have your letter.
Thank you. It wasn't in the other attachment. I commend that to you. Thank you.
The clerks are awesome. Nothing gets by them.
I have to concur. They are excellent, and we appreciate their help. Having dealt with that matter so expeditiously, I'll move on to my next matter, Your Worship. I appear on behalf of Shell Canada, and if you go to page 21 at the bottom, you should find my letter back from April the 21st with regard to Shell Canada. Just for the record, the Shell lands are located in a vacant triangular area north of Dundas and west of Old Bronte Road. Some of you may remember there used to be a Shell gas station there. That's the site. I would advise you that the site was zoned for a gas station, and obviously my client has similar concerns to that expressed by Mr. Labreche with regard to prohibitions in an official plan, including gas stations. I would advise you that these lands are totally vacant, and because these lands are totally vacant, in conjunction with the McKellar lands that are next door and the lands further north, that whole triangular area is totally vacant. And therefore, from a planning perspective, as a primary focus for intensification, these lands fit your criteria extraordinarily well. The concern, of course, is the fact that there are policies that require compatibility with lands on the east side of Old Bronte Road. And those lands are low-density lands. And since this area is going to be intensifying and growing in development, our suggestion to you is that it really impedes the policy direction that you're trying to achieve with regard to intensification in this area by requiring compatibility with, and I would say this respectfully, a historic land use on the east side of Bronte Road. Our suggestion to you is, in fact, that since this is a primary area of intensification, that you ought to let it proceed so appropriately. And therefore, based on our concerns with regard to the prohibition and on this being a primary intensification area, our suggestion is that this policy direction should be revisited. Finally, Your Worship, I'd just like to correct one thing. There is an Ontario Municipal Board hearing on February the 22nd. That is correct. It's only a procedural hearing, a pre-hearing. It's not on the merits. It's not any place where live evidence is going to be called and a substantive decision is going to be made. It is only to set out some procedural steps for the next phase of the hearing. So I just wanted to confirm that for the record. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that any members of council might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, for your information. I see no questions, but thank you very much for attending. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this public hearing item? Sir, would you please join us at the microphone, introduce yourself for the clerk, and share your information with council?
Yeah, my name is Hari Goel. I represent the interest of the property number 3249 and 3259, which are the north of the area under consideration. I just want to know why those 4 or 5 property which are north of this area under consideration has not been made a part of this Plarmero village consideration. And second thing, if this area gets the water and sewerage facility, will we also get or not those 4 or 5 property areas?
All right, well, let's see if we can get any kind of answer for you. Commissioner?
If you can show the slide, I can show you what the area we are talking, or if you understand.
Mayor, members of council, in terms of the servicing question would actually be dealt with through the region, through their servicing policies. With the official plan policies in place, then it gives a context for the region to deal with servicing, and so they would deal with that specifically. In terms of the area study of the amendment, that was defined through the previous official plan amendment that was approved that identified a specific area as a special study. So only that area was considered as part of this work.
Would it be helpful to the delegate to, could that answer be framed as, this is, we're only doing with this area because it's the only part that hasn't already been dealt with in the surround?
When those 4 or 5 property which are now isolated from neither from this plan or from other plan will be dealt with, or what will be the status or how they will be treated as?
As I'm understanding the Commissioner, these steps which we're taking complete the planning policy regime for the entire area and position you to go to the region to pursue the region's permission for water and wastewater. Commissioner?
In terms of the servicing, yes, that is correct. And on the designations as well. The previous amendment already dealt with the property that I believe you're referring to, and it had designated, and I'm just trying to confirm, I think employment already. So you have a designation already on those lands, which then the region would look at it in terms of its servicing program.
They are designated as employment property for, because when one is a temple and another is, you can't just change the correct, I don't know.
As the lands you're talking about may be outside this study area?
Yeah, it's outside. So why I'm saying is why that those 4 property are not made part of this.
Right, because they've already been dealt with. To assist you, I would invite you to contact our planning staff. The planning director, Dana Anderson, might be the place to start at your convenience, and they can assist you to better understand the planning for the area that's already taken place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming with your questions. Anyone else? Sir? Please introduce yourself for the clerk and share your information, and if possible, speak into the microphone.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Shapira, and I'm part of the ownership group of the lands immediately north of Mr. Taylor's 2 clients in the triangle, as well as certain other lands in the immediate area of northwest Oakville. And I wasn't planning on addressing the council tonight, but since Councillor Elgar raised some of the points that are included in our materials in the Bousfields letter that I think is page number 50 of the materials tonight, perhaps in further clarification of our concerns with respect to staff's response. Our concern is, it's one thing to say that we have 19 hectares that's equivalent to 19 football fields or whatever the reference was. It would be another thing if those lands were laid out as if they were 19 football fields in a row. Unfortunately, they are not. We have real physical limitations with these lands in that we have green space to one side and we have 2 major thoroughfares, one running up basically the westerly border and one to the south, as well as other limitations that have been discussed and referenced. Our concern is especially since we support these policies and believe that mixed use is right for this area, and that is in fact what we would like to do here, our concern is the physical limitations will prevent us from doing it to the scale that is desired in these policies, and furthermore that, with the guidelines that are from an urban design standpoint, we won't be able to build in such a way that would enable us to do so in any meaningful way in the near future. So our concern is with the implementation of the policies at any time in the near future. And furthermore, I guess it's one thing to say that we've looked at policies elsewhere in the area, and so we've modified appropriately for this specific node, but the differences between Trafalgar and the node that we're talking about here are obvious to everybody on council. And so we think specific attention has to be paid, and perhaps what needs to be considered is that the size of the node needs to be expanded to accommodate at very least a traffic pattern that would accommodate these uses that we're looking at. And so that's what we submit for council to consider, and we're happy to follow up in any way required. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the explanation and the offer. All right, Council, that seems to be the end of the information the public has to bring to us. I'll confine it to table and I'll look for a motion. Councillor Knoll, you indicated you had an amendment.
Well, I would defer to my colleague from Ward 4 to make the motion, and I'd make the amendment to that motion.
Any councillor? Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, I would so move the staff recommendation we have before us tonight. A lot of work has gone into this. I think the presentation took us back from 2003 fast forward through to 2011. I think it went through all the steps. So I'm just hopeful that we don't lose sight of the connection between the north and the south. Thanks. So
thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. As I mentioned before, I had circulated just briefly before the meeting a couple suggestions to the staff. They've indicated one they don't have a problem with, and the second one they put a big question mark beside it, so I'm not sure if they didn't support it or they didn't understand it. So I'm going to try both of these. Perhaps the mover might think these are friendly, I'm not sure, but I'll hand this to the clerk after I read it. They're very simple. The first one is to 8.5.12, and it's simply adding the words that reflect a heritage character after the words Main Street. So it would modify the paragraph to read, Old Bronte Road shall have a strong Main Street presence that reflects a heritage character. So that's simply the change in that one. And the second one is with respect to 8.6.4.5. And that is in number E. Number E reflects a number of opportunities to encourage awareness and appreciation of Palermo Village. And this is an addition of one more possibility, and that is adding the words, after the words signage programs, insert the words street, square, and park naming. So that would change that paragraph to read, the town will encourage awareness and appreciation of Palermo Village through such activities as signage programs, street, square, and park naming, tours and brochures, etc. So they're both fairly minor motions, but they would go a long way to both enshrine in all sections of this amendment the heritage, I guess, concerns, but at the same time add an additional tool in the toolbox for the long-term preservation of heritage awareness in that community. So I'll pass these to the clerk.
Perhaps the clerk could, maybe we could post these, put them on the screen, somehow assist council. And Madam Commissioner, do staff have advice on these for council?
Both the Director Anderson and myself had reviewed it just before the meeting, and in terms of the wording, they're both changes that would be consistent with the document that's here. So we'd have no objection if council wanted to add that wording.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I'll take it as a friendly amendment.
All right. Nevertheless, we'll vote on the amendment. Councillor Adams.
Okay, if you want to deal with the amendment now, that's fine. I just wish to remind you or request you to separate that section that relates to the interest of TDL, the drive-throughs, and 8643C, both here and when you do the bylaw.
When we get there, we'll be sure to do that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. All in favor of Councillor Knoll's amendment, please raise your hands. That carries. Now, where is my little wording here? All right. I'm now going to call for the vote on the motion moved by Councillor Elgar, excluding those components related to drive-through facilities and the TDL Group Corp. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. I'll now call for the vote on the remainder of the motion. Councillor Adams not participating. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Councillor Adams, having declared a pecuniary interest, did not vote on that matter. And that brings us to our second public hearing item, which I see Rob Thun getting ready to present to us. And that is the proposed removal of the holding H provisions on the Halton Healthcare Services and Oakville Hydro Energy Services files for the North Oakville Hospital. Mr. Thun, we're all set for you.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. This is a statutory public meeting and a recommendation report meeting. Halton Healthcare Services and Oakville Hydro Energy Services, Inc. have submitted applications for the removal of their respective holding provisions, H1 and H3, within the North Oakville zoning bylaw related to the new hospital project north of Dundas Street. The staff report, item number 4, can be found on page 59 of tonight's agenda, with the associated bylaw being on page 151. Both sites are located north of Dundas Street at 3rd Line. The address for the Halton Healthcare Services site is 3000 3rd Line. The Oakville Hydro Energy Services site is 3135 3rd Line. It should be noted that both of these sites are being developed as one project. Bylaw 2009-189, the North Oakville zoning bylaw, contains holding provisions H1 and H3 related to the environmental implementation report / functional servicing report, amendment to the regional bylaw 4204, and provisions being made for the design and construction of external services required to service the Oakville Hydro site as shown on the previous slide. These holding provisions were requested by Halton Region, Conservation Halton, and the town as part of reviewing zoning bylaw amendments for both sites. Since being incorporated into the North Oakville zoning bylaw, the proponents, the hospital and Oakville Hydro Energy Services, have been working diligently with all 3 agencies to address the holding provisions amongst other matters. As a result of this effort, the EIR has been revised to the satisfaction of all 3 agencies. Regional staff have advised that Regional Bylaw 131-10 repeals and replaces Bylaw 4204, and provisions have also been made related to the external services for the Oakville Hydro site. For Council's information, amendments will be necessary to the master site plan approval granted by Council on June 7th, 2010, as a result of the resolution of the EIR-FSS. These amendments will be submitted by the winning bidder, and future report will be brought back to the Site Planning Committee outlining all those amendments. So, Your Worship and members of Council, in consideration that the holding provisions H1 and H3 have been satisfactorily addressed to Halton Region, Conservation Halton, and the town staff put forward the following recommendation for council's consideration as outlined on page 59 of tonight's agenda and as shown on the slide above. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Thun, for your report. Do you have questions for staff? Councillor Elgar.
Mr. Thun, thanks for the presentation. On page 60 of the report, I notice third line continues north, and I thought there was part of the deal was that would be stopped up.
I'm sorry?
Third line going north.
Third line will stop just north of the Oakville Hydro Energy Services site.
So when will it be erased from maps that we see going forward?
I'll take that under advisement and advise the Technical Services branch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Adams.
Can I ask you about the third line design? Last time I recall seeing the third line issue, we asked staff to review the matter of how the bicycle lanes would be designed to physically separate them or provide some consideration for physical separation. Could you tell me where that is and how that would relate to the design requirements that would fall into this piece?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll pass this over to Darnell Lambert.
Councillor Adams, that was I believe through the third line EA, that was an additional recommendation by council to bring that back during the detailed design to consider off-road facilities in lieu of on-road facilities. So during the detailed design development, we will be coming back to council with that matter.
How does detailed design match up with and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but in terms of where where third line is being done by somebody else and it's part of a bigger contract, how do the two come together? What's the process look like?
At this point, we are considering that the consortium will complete the detailed design work, so that information would be passed along to them. We still have that obligation, though, to bring that back to council to get that item addressed.
So it would become part of their contract to do that, to come back through council in effect?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Are there members? I understand we have a delegation registered. Tom Plamondon. I hope I haven't mangled your name.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. You did not.
Well, it was a lucky stab.
I appreciate that.
Council looks forward to your information.
I am just here, Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff, to support the staff recommendations and essentially thank council and staff for helping us work through some very complex and complicated matters with regard to both sites, and also to endorse that council deals with the two separate applications which have now been merged into one amendment that takes care of removal of the H. So with that, we are here if there are any further questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Elgar will oblige you with a question.
Could you tell me exactly when the start date is going to be for this project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can update council. At present, it looks like the RFP, which is in its final stages now, will be received on February the 25th. So that's when it closes. The preferred proponent will then be identified. So we go through a series of reviews of the bidding documents that come in. That should take place in and around the end of May. And then with the commercial and financial close of all of those documents towards the beginning of August. So I can tell you that once we reach the point where we have identified who the preferred proponent is, that the preferred proponent will then start making their presence in the town and with staff very visible. There is a great degree of anxiousness on everyone's part to get shovels in the ground.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe we have shovel in the ground maybe September, October, hopefully.
Or as early as the end of August.
Okay. And with that date, if you start in August or September, when will the doors open at the hospital? Because Councillor Lapworth and I are getting asked, when's that hospital opening?
Yeah, it's still pretty much on track, but it's December of 2015, summer of 2015.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for those news bulletins.
My pleasure.
That's more precise information than we've had in a long time. Thank you very much, sir, for your information. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this item? Seeing none, I'll confine it to table. Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to give you a motion to approve the staff recommendation to remove the holding provisions in Part 1 and also to pass the bylaw as referenced in Part 2.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? They are carried. Congratulations to everyone concerned. Council, that ends our public hearing items and brings us to our 3 discussion items. We have first the notice of intention to demolish at 409 Pine Avenue, and the recommendation is that the subject heritage planning staff report regarding the intention to demolish be received. How do you wish to proceed, Councillor Knoll?
Your Worship, I'll give you a motion for the staff recommendation on both 5 and 6, if it's your pleasure.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Discussion? Any members of the public with information for council on these 2 files, 409 Pine and 42 Park? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Knoll, your motions carry. That brings us to number 7, the new hospital site plan implementation. You have your addendum, and how do you wish to proceed? Mr. Lambert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I do have a bit of a pictorial overview if you wish. Otherwise, I'm certainly here to just answer questions if you'd like.
Council, we'd like to see your pictures.
All right.
You said pictures. It got our attention.
Pictorial overview. All right, just to put this into context, Council, this is the area north of Dundas Street at 3rd Line. You have the lands shaded in light yellow owned by Halton Healthcare Services. The land shaded in light blue owned by ORC. Land shaded in a light orange, your future district energy site. And the lands in yellow are lands currently owned by the town of Oakville. And you'll see 3rd Line actually terminates at the north limit of the district energy site. Just to look at some of the obligations to be built as part of this development, there is the need to advance the Boyne Trunk Sanitary Sewer Works along 3rd Line from Dundas Street at least up to the district energy site, and then from there in the future the Region of Halton will take it from that location and run westerly over and then eventually up through highway number 25. Also, as part of this project, there is the need to develop a diversion system, a channel, which will run through the Glenorchy area, and a diversion pipe, which will go from the diversion channel down 3rd Line and into the stormwater management facility. Also, as part of this development, there is the need to develop 2 off-site stormwater management ponds, one for the Glen Oak subwatershed system to the east of the site, and one for the Taplow Creek subwatershed system along the west boundary of the site. Also, as part of this work, Halton Healthcare will be required to build and deliver the Western Road, which will flank the western side of this property. And also up for consideration is the inclusion of the 3rd Line construction works north of Dundas Street, up to the future north boundary of the what's commonly referred to as the new Burnham-Thorpe Road. So there's a fair amount of work to be undertaken. Aside from building a hospital, there's building roads, there's building off-site stormwater management ponds, there's building a diversion pipe system, and there's also the advancement of other capital works in this area, being the Boyne Trunk Sanitary Sewer System. So we do have a number of recommendations for you to consider this evening in order to include some of the town's works within this overall project. One is to pre-commit the funding for third line constructions in the 2011 and 2012 capital budgets. Also to allow the third line works to be bid and constructed through the HHS Infrastructure Ontario RFP process. There's also the need to accept early transfer of lands from Halton Healthcare, ORC, and Oakville Hydro Energy Systems for the purpose of public roads. Normally, these would be conveyed through as part of a site plan agreement. What we're asking for is that these be conveyed to the town earlier in the process than normally would be. Also to allow the stormwater management ponds that are off-site to be secured through an alternate arrangement. What we're talking about here is a lease arrangement where the town would be the leasee with ORC and Halton Healthcare. And those ponds would be in the future conveyed to the town of Oakville. Also to authorize staff to negotiate and finalize other necessary agreements to implement the site plan approval to the satisfaction of the CAO and the town solicitor. And last, to authorize the mayor and the clerk to authorize such agreements that may be developed. Thank you.
I have several questions for you, Mr. Lambert, starting with Councillor Adams and then Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for your answers with respect to third line. Can you tell me about the diversion system on the north, the channel and piping, and more specifically the diversion system channel? Whose lands will those ultimately be? Who's designing it, and what's the type of land that they're shown on right now? Is that, environmental lands? What is that?
That is lands currently owned by ORC, and I believe through a licensing agreement with Conservation Halton, that is the Glenorchy Conservation Area. It is a natural channel design concept, which essentially takes runoff from the Glen Oak Creek subwatershed system and diverts it over to the 16-mile creek tributary. This solution was born out of sort of balancing the watersheds in the area as it's being divvied up for development. The ultimate ownership of that, as it's shown on the map right now, would be simply a natural channel design within the Glenorchy Conservation Area. Thus, I would be the opinion that it would be something that CH would manage with the lands. As far as design work, I believe you had another question, who's designing it? Halton Healthcare's consultants, and then subsequently the consortium will finalize the design details for the diversion channel system and the pipe itself.
So, I presume that requires some form of environmental assessment that's specific to that diversion system? Is that correct? Or what process can members of the public take part in to have an opinion on whether they like the design format effect of that diversion system on the natural lands?
I'm unaware of any environmental assessment process that this would have to go through. Certainly ORC, being the owner of the lands, would have to be agreeable to the work that's being done on the lands. And I think simply through their management agreement, certainly for the natural channel design that's there, I believe that's something that they can handle themselves internally as a provincial body. So I'm not sure there is actually any public process to go through other than your regulatory approvals, which may be the DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Conservation Halton, along with ORC being the land holder.
The question is along the same lines of as Councillor Adams, related to piping of water. That's kind of that was used to be used 70s and 80s, but I thought they'd kind of moved ahead from that and decided that piping underground runoff wasn't such a great idea. And that's the first I've seen this.
Let me try and explain.
The question is, what happened to our upgraded engineering standards?
Admittedly, when the EIR FSS addendum came through, this certainly raised our eyebrows as well, so perhaps I can try and explain the function of the system. The water flowing through Glen Oak Creek system today, if you can see my cursor arrow on your screens, flows from north to south vis-a-vis the Glen Oak stream system that goes like this. The intent here was to divert flows from the Glen Oak system simply over to the 16 Mile Creek tributary by a natural channel design, and essentially that would have been the end of that exercise. However, through the modeling work that was done, there were erosion threshold limits that were triggered along the 16 Mile Creek tributary. Therefore, it was necessary to, I'll say, bleed off some of the higher flow events and bring them around vis-a-vis this diversion pipe down third line into the Glen Oak Pond, where then it will be split and brought back into the 16 Mile Creek tributary system. So there will be periods of time where this pipe will actually be dry, and a base flow system will be maintained from Glen Oak over to the 16 Mile Creek system. So it is not a simple diversion of all flows out of the natural channel into a pipe and then back into 16 Mile Creek system. It is only when the thresholds are exceeded that flow will enter into the diversion pipe itself and make its way as a bypass, if you will, around the area. There's been significant dialogue with Conservation Halton as well as engineering staff here on this concept. It certainly wasn't one that was desirable at sort of, I'll say, first discussion about the balancing of the flows in this area. But once further review work was done and those erosion thresholds were, I'll say, triggered, this is really a technical solution to that problem, which preserves the integrity of the environment here.
Does the pipe stop where you're showing it on the map at the west, just on top of the M under future community? Like, is that where it stopped, or does it keep going west along the top of the community park? That, I can see that this diversion system.
Yep, if I will, let me just get rid of this.
I don't think we've seen this before. It seems to be something that just kind of blew in tonight.
So the diversion channel itself goes from Glen Oak Creek along the top and along the north boundary of the district energy site and back into the 16 Mile Creek tributary system, if you can follow that. So that is the natural channel, and for the most intents and purposes, the base flow will flow that way within a natural channel design. And only when flow levels exceed a certain limit do they then enter the pipe system and are brought down third line into the Glen Oak Pond and then outlet again into the 16 Mile Creek system.
And Conservation Halton has signed off that this is a great way to do it?
Yes, they have.
I see. Okay. Can you remind me where the trunk sewers are here, also going across the regional trunk sewers?
Currently, right now, the trunk sewer that's destined for the Milton area comes up third line and terminates on the north side of Dundas Street. It's at this point, the Boyne trunk sewer will be picked up, heading north along third line, again to the north limit of the district energy site, and the consortium will terminate works there. The Regional Halton will then pick it up from this point and head westerly along what will be a future road in this area, over to some point about here, and then it'll go up through the future community park and then straight up, and I believe it'll tie in with Bronny Road at some point in the north.
Final question is, if you go to back down to Dundas, there is a house down there, and I know that was an issue a few months ago. And can you show me where it is in the map and how it fits in with that westerly road, I think it was called? Can you take me back to show me that westerly road to see where it fits? Yeah, thanks.
This is the property here. And as I understand it, there was negotiation between Halton Health Services and the owner of that property, whereby a land purchase and a land swap, I believe, have taken place to allow the western road to produce through to Dundas Street, with all parties and all matters being settled.
Okay, thank you very much, because I know that was an issue and I didn't realize that it had been settled, but that's good news. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. On page 8, where it discusses the financial implications, first of all, I understand it's a 100% development charge project, so that's great. But I'm confused by the statement here, because it first says that it will not present a problem for the 2011 Budget Committee, but then it goes on to say that it could constrain the 2011 and future budget committees. Could somebody provide some clarity for me on that statement and exactly what is meant by this statement, and also what sort of constraints could be placed on other projects as a result? Because it refers to that as well in this statement.
I will put on my financial hat and try and answer that question for you. I'll give you more, I guess, an example. If there was a desire on this council to advance another 100% development charge project, and simply the cash flow was not there to allow development charge monies to be used, that could be a bit of an issue. Noting that you have committed these funds to that particular year, you don't have the option, which you may have otherwise have, of simply deferring these works and allowing yourself to advance another project.
So the issue is on what could be, not what is.
Correct.
Okay, so as of today, in the horizon we see now, it's not going to cause us any issues.
Correct.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Adams.
Sort of a question to our planning side. The diversion system channel in the secondary planning process it went through and the original official plan amendments, what color of stream was that? Was that a high constraint, medium constraint, low constraint, or where did that fall within that realm of planning?
It would have been considered a green stream. The only stream I think that's a blue in this area is further to the west of here, completely away from the hospital. So all these were green streams, which means they could have been piped.
So these were all considered low constraint?
Correct.
And what did low constraint require with respect to the process for piping them? The process for discussion around who decided what the piping was going to look like, who decides where channeling was going to occur, and at what point do you decide there's too much flow in the original channel and now it's time to pipe off some of it down to a stormwater management pond?
Those decisions would be a engineering, particularly development engineering and conservation Halton matter to deal with.
So there's never any contemplation of a public review of any of that? No? Okay.
In part, the environmental impact review functional servicing plan, the EIR/FSS, its terms of reference was specifically to deal with those types of issues. And when we had brought the EIR/FSS forward as part of the rezoning application, because under the secondary plan you have to have completed those studies in order to approve development. So in part that rezoning process plays that public review component. This diversion channel, or that natural stream, was shown as part of that. I think what's come in new as part of the final review of the EIR, very much part with the Conservation Halton, was the diversion of the pipe itself. So you'll see the pipe that comes from the edge of the diversion channel and then down third line. That's the new element. And the only reason that was considered as part of the final work was because it took enough water off of that stream so it didn't create issues down the 16 Mile. So it was trying to lessen the impact and the erosion further down 16 Mile by siphoning off some of that stream. So to go back to the initial question, I think the public process is through the rezoning.
And council would have authorized staff to sign off on the designs through the original review that we had. So when we would have approved something saying staff must be content with the engineering design of the stormwater management system, including the diversion.
Yes, as part of the rezoning application process, we would have had input in from Conservation Halton, because they're really our partner in reviewing these, as well as our own technical staff, in order to bring the recommendation forward to council in order to approve the rezoning. So all of those issues would have been dealt with at that point. There were a few outstanding issues, which is why we had the H zone, and what you're seeing now is the resolution of those issues with just that new pipe introduced. The channel had been part of the earlier concepts.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Giddings.
The retention pond on the bottom right, is the flow that's going to go there through the channel and the pipe, is that the only flow that's going to be directed into that holding pond?
No, this holding pond will be serving, if I was to sort of draw a magic line, all development, if you follow my cursor, to the west of that line. So all of these ORC lands, the district energy site, these future employment lands, a portion of the future community park up here, all of that also drains into this pond, along with some of the flow from the Glen Oak Creek system itself.
Does that help you? Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lambert, Councillor Elgar and I continue to get questions about access to the plaza in the southwest corner of Third Line and Dundas. At what point in time, if we have a date, would the Third Line be open north of Dundas with the traffic signal working in all four directions?
If I was to look into my crystal ball, Councillor Lapworth, I would suggest that the works for, as I would envision them, we heard earlier this evening that shovel could be in the ground late 2011. Some of the first advance works will be this Boyne trunk sanitary sewer, given the depth and the size of pipe that has to go in. The diversion channel and the diversion pipe will also be one of the first works into the area, along with the stormwater management facilities, followed by local services up Third Line and the Western Road, and then Third Line itself would then be put into place. I would imagine that could be something that could be accomplished late 2012, maybe the spring of 2013, and open to the public.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Then it sounds like you've satisfied yourself with questions. Will someone oblige us with a motion? Councillor Elgar.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The staff recommendation is adopted. There are no confidential discussion items. You have the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee addendum distributed. How do you wish to proceed? Councillor Knoll. I'll move receipt. Thank you. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any? It is received. We need a councillor to kindly move that we rise and report to council. And Councillor Elgar, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, public hearing items 3 and 4, discussion items 5, 6, and 7, and advisory minutes item 8 as noted by the clerk. I need a mover and seconder for this report. Councillor Elgar, Councillor Duddick, all in favor? Opposed? The report is adopted. Is there any new business, members of council? We need a mover and seconder then for the consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Johnston, Councillor Robinson, and this is authority that all of the bylaws excluding bylaw 2011-03 be passed. I'll call a vote on that separately. All in favor? Just a few more hands, please. All right, now it passes. And then I call the vote on bylaw 2011-03, excluding those components related to TDL Group Corp. And Councillor Adams, you're eligible to vote on this one. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And now, Councillor Adams, if you'd push back from the table, you'll not participate as we vote on the remainder of the motion to pass bylaw 2011-03. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That too is carried. Thank you very much for your time and attention. That ends the agenda, and we are adjourned.